After saving the starving Apache POW woman, the cowboy said, "You're under my protection now." The sun was low in the sky, painting the western plains with shades of gold and red. A soft wind blew across the dry grass, carrying the faint scent of dust and sagebrush. A lone cowboy rode slowly along a narrow trail that cut through the empty stretch of land. His horse's hooves made a steady rhythm on the hard earth, and the cowboy's eyes scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of trouble. He was a man used to traveling alone, carrying only what he could manage on horseback: his rifle, a bedroll, and a small leather bag of supplies. Life on the frontier was hard, but he had long ago grown used to the solitude. As he rode, the cowboy noticed something unusual. The trail ahead was mostly clear, but there were small, irregular footprints in the dirt. Footprints that didn't belong to a man or even a horse. They were delicate and uneven, as if someone had been struggling to walk. His curiosity was piqued. He reined in his horse and examined the prints carefully. They led off the main trail and disappeared into a shallow ravine hidden by tall grass. Cautiously, he dismounted and moved closer. The wind shifted, and he caught a faint smell of smoke and something else, something metallic and sharp. He crouched low and peered into the ravine. There, huddled against the earth, was a young woman. She looked thin to the point of frailty, her clothing torn and dirty, and her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face. Her eyes were closed and she barely moved. For a moment, the cowboy felt a pang of fear. The frontier was a dangerous place, and strangers could be hostile, especially someone who might have been on the run. But as he watched her, fear gave way to concern. The woman was clearly starving and weak. Her lips were cracked, and her skin was pale, almost gray from hunger and exposure. Even from a distance, he could see the way her chest rose and fell with shallow, uneven breaths. She needed help. The cowboy slowly approached, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice carrying over the gentle wind. "You okay?" The woman stirred at the sound. Her eyes opened slowly, clouded with confusion and fear. When she saw him, she flinched and pulled herself farther into the shadow of the ravine, trying to make herself smaller, as if she could disappear. He could see the raw fear in her gaze, a fear that spoke of long nights spent hiding, running, and surviving. "I am not going to hurt you," he said gently, kneeling a few feet away. "I just want to help." She did not answer, only shaking her head slightly. Her arms hugged her knees, and she pressed her face against them. It was clear she had learned to trust no one. The cowboy understood. The frontier could be cruel. People often had to protect themselves in ways that left scars that were not visible. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small canteen of water. "Drink this," he said, holding it out. "You need it." For a long moment, she did nothing. Then, with a shaky hand, she reached out and took the canteen. She drank slowly, as if afraid the water would vanish if she drank too much at once. The cowboy waited patiently, watching her every movement, making sure not to startle her. When she had finished, he spoke again. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." This time she looked at him, and he could see a flicker of something else in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or disbelief. The world had been cruel to her for so long that the idea of someone being kind without expecting something in return was foreign. Do you need food?" he asked gently. "I have some bread and dried meat." Her lips trembled, and she nodded slightly. The cowboy reached into his bag and offered her a small piece of bread. She took it with shaking fingers and ate slowly, as if savoring every crumb. As she ate, he watched her closely. He could see the bones under her thin arms, the hollowed cheeks, and the sunken eyes. Hours dead? This was someone who had been through a lot. Someone who had suffered. Once she had eaten, the cowboy finally sat down beside her, giving her space but letting her know he was there. "Where are you from?" he asked softly, not wanting to rush her. She looked away, her eyes scanning the horizon. For a moment, it seemed as if she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Apache," she said. The cowboy nodded slowly. He had heard of the Apache people, who lived in the harsh lands of the West, often in conflict with settlers and soldiers. He did not judge her. He only felt a growing sense of responsibility. This woman had been left to suffer alone, and he had found her. "I'm going to help you," he said simply. "We'll get you somewhere safe. You won't have to be alone anymore." Her eyes widened slightly at his words. She had likely spent weeks, maybe months, fending for herself, hiding from everyone. The idea of someone offering protection without asking for anything in return was almost unimaginable. But she did not speak, only nodded faintly, as if accepting his promise without fully trusting it. The cowboy took a deep breath and looked around the ravine. It was not a safe place to linger. Wild animals could be nearby, and anyone tracking her might be close as well. "We need to move," he said. "Can you walk?" She hesitated, then tried to stand. Her legs wobbled beneath her, and she stumbled slightly. He reached out and steadied her. "Take it slow," he said. "I'll help you." Together they began the slow journey out of the ravine. The cowboy supported her, offering a hand and steadying her when she faltered. She leaned on him, fragile and weary, but determined to keep going. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of freedom and danger alike. As they walked, the cowboy's mind wandered. He wondered how she had ended up in such a state. Had she escaped from someone who meant to harm her? Had she been lost for days, struggling to survive on her own? The questions pressed at him, but he knew there would be time to learn her story later. Right now, the priority was getting her to safety. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains. The cowboy urged his horse forward, letting her rest against him as they moved. The landscape around them was both beautiful and unforgiving. Rolling hills, scattered trees, and wide open fields stretched as far as the eye could see. It was the kind of land that could provide shelter if you knew it well, or trap you if you did not. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing with a shallow stream. The cowboy helped her sit by the water and offered her more to drink. She drank greedily this time, her body craving nourishment. He could see the life slowly returning to her face, the color returning to her cheeks, the strength coming back to her limbs.
"You're going to be okay," he said softly.
"I'll make sure of it." For the first time since he had found her, she looked at him fully. Her eyes were wary but not afraid. There was a faint glimmer of hope in them, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. The cowboy felt a quiet pride. He had saved her, yes, but more than that, he had given her something she had not had in a long time. Someone who would stand by her, someone who would not let her face the world alone. As the sky turned deep blue and the first stars appeared, he set up a small camp for the night. He gathered firewood, built a modest fire, and ensured she was warm and comfortable. He did not sleep right away, keeping watch over her. The frontier was unpredictable, and he could not afford to let his guard down. But as he watched her rest, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, he had found a way to make a difference. He had found a way to protect someone who could not protect herself. And in that quiet moment, with the fire crackling and the stars shining overhead, the cowboy made a silent promise to himself. No matter what dangers lay ahead, no matter how difficult the journey might become, he would keep her safe. He would be her protector, her guide, and her companion through the trials that awaited them. For the young Apache woman, it was a beginning she never thought possible. And for the cowboy, it was the start of a bond that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the land in shades of soft gold and amber. The cowboy stirred from his small roll of blankets, careful not to wake the young Apache woman. She had slept through the night, curled up near the fire, and the first thing he noticed was how much stronger she looked already. Her cheeks had gained a faint color, and her eyes, though still cautious, were clearer than before. He fed her a simple breakfast of bread and dried meat, letting her eat slowly. She accepted the food quietly, still wary, still unsure. The cowboy watched her carefully, speaking softly to encourage her. "You'll need your strength if we keep moving today," he said. "The world out here can be dangerous, but together we can handle it." She nodded but did not speak. Words were still difficult for her, and he understood. Trauma and fear could make it hard to trust anyone, let alone speak freely. He decided to let her take her time. Trust, he knew, could not be forced. It had to be earned. Once she had eaten and rested for a while, the cowboy helped her to her feet. Her legs were still weak, but she had gained some energy overnight. They mounted their horses and began to travel. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a mixture of beauty and danger. Rolling hills, scattered trees, and patches of rocky ground made the journey slow, but it gave them a chance to rest when needed and to keep watch for any signs of trouble. As they rode, the cowboy noticed her glancing around more often, her eyes scanning the landscape as if searching for danger. He understood that feeling well. He had spent much of his life moving through this land alone, always alert. But he wanted her to feel safer, even if just a little. "You don't have to be afraid," he said gently. "I'm here, and I won't let anyone hurt you." She looked at him then, really looked, and he could see a mixture of emotions in her eyes: caution, curiosity, and a flicker of hope. She did not speak, but the small nod she gave was enough. It was a start. The journey continued, and as the day went on, the cowboy began to notice small details about her. She moved carefully, almost as if she were trying not to disturb the world around her. Her hands were rough and calloused, but not from work she had chosen. They bore the marks of struggle and survival. Her eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. She had learned to watch and wait, to understand her surroundings in order to stay alive. The cowboy respected her strength. Many would have assumed that someone so weak and hungry would be helpless, but he could see the fire in her spirit. There was courage there, a determination to survive against all odds. He admired it quietly, knowing that she had endured more than he could imagine. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a small stream. The cowboy stopped and let their horses drink. He helped her dismount, and she knelt to drink from the cool water. Her reflection shimmered in the surface, and he saw how much she had already changed from the woman he had found the day before. She was beginning to regain life and energy, but there was still a long journey ahead. They rested briefly by the stream, eating another small meal. The cowboy tried to learn more about her story, but she still spoke little. When he asked questions, she would answer with a single word or shake her head. He did not push her. Some wounds, he knew, could not be healed quickly. Instead, He focused on practical matters. "We need to keep moving if we want to reach a safe place by nightfall," he said. "Do you think you can manage it?" She nodded, determined. He respected that determination. It was not just physical strength she would need, but mental strength as well. The frontier could be unforgiving, and they could not afford to be careless. As they continued their journey, the cowboy noticed signs of the harshness of the land. Scorched grass from a past fire, jagged rocks, and sudden drops in the terrain made their progress slow. He carefully guided their horses, watching every step. The young woman followed his lead, learning quickly how to move safely through the difficult terrain. By mid-afternoon, they came across a small grove of trees. The cowboy decided it would be a good place to rest for a while. He tied the horses to sturdy branches and led the woman to a shaded spot. "Sit down and rest," he said. "I'll keep watch." She obeyed, sitting on a patch of soft grass, and for a moment they sat in silence. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds. The cowboy used this time to plan their route, thinking ahead to where they could find shelter for the night. "Do you have a name?" he asked softly, hoping to connect with her in some small way. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Ahioka." The cowboy nodded, committing the name to memory. "Ahioka," he repeated gently. "It's a good name. You have a strong one." Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was a small smile on her lips. It was fleeting, but it was real. It was the first sign that she was beginning to trust him. As the afternoon passed, they faced a small challenge. A wild coyote appeared nearby, eyeing their horses. The cowboy stood slowly, putting himself between the animal and Ahioka. "Stay calm," he said. The coyote barked once, then retreated into the brush. Ahioka watched silently, a mix of fear and relief in her eyes. "You see," he said gently, "nothing can harm us as long as we stay alert." She nodded, her confidence growing slowly with each passing hour. She was learning that she did not have to face the world alone anymore. The cowboy's presence was a shield, yes, but it was also a guide. By late afternoon, they continued toward a distant hill where the cowboy knew there might be shelter. The journey was long and tiring, but Ahioka's strength returned bit by bit. She began to walk with more confidence, helping with the horses and learning the patterns of the land. The cowboy noticed her resilience and silently admired it. She was more than just a survivor. She was strong, even if she did not yet realize it herself. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, the cowboy spotted an old cabin in the distance. It was small, weathered, and abandoned, but it offered protection from the elements. "We'll stop there for the night," he said. "It's safe enough, and we can rest before moving further tomorrow." Ahioka agreed silently, tired but relieved. Together they led their horses to the cabin and secured them nearby. The cowboy built a small fire outside and prepared a simple meal. As they ate, the silence between them was comfortable, rather than tense. They had shared a long day, and the bond between them was growing, quiet but real. After the meal, the cowboy checked the cabin carefully, making sure there were no hidden dangers. He then helped Ahioka inside, laying down blankets and making sure she was comfortable. "You'll be safe here tonight," he said. "No one will harm you." She looked around, taking in the small space, and for the first time she seemed to feel a sense of security. She nodded, a small, almost shy gesture of trust. The cowboy smiled quietly. He knew this was just the beginning. Trust could not be rushed, and he was willing to give her the time she needed. As the night deepened, they sat near the fire, the cowboy keeping watch while Ahioka rested. She spoke a few words that night, telling him fragments of her story. The hardships she had faced, the days without food, the fear of being caught or harmed. He listened quietly, offering comfort and reassurance, careful not to interrupt or judge. By the time the stars shone brightly overhead, Ayoka had begun to feel a little safer, a little more at ease. The cowboy, too, felt a sense of purpose and satisfaction. He had saved her from immediate danger, but more importantly, he was giving her something far more valuable: hope. And in the quiet of that night, under the wide open sky of the western plains, the journey of two strangers, one survivor and one protector, truly began. They did not yet know the challenges that awaited them, the dangers that would test their courage, or the bond that would grow between them. But for now, they rested, side by side, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. The morning sun broke through the thin mist that hung over the plains, casting a warm, golden light over the land. The cowboy rose first, stretching his stiff muscles from the night spent on the cabin floor. He looked over at Ahioka, who was still asleep, her dark hair spread across the blankets. She seemed more rested than the day before, and he could see a faint strength returning to her frame. Her breathing was steady, and for the first time she looked peaceful, if only for a moment. He quietly moved to the small stream outside to fill his canteen and give water to the horses. The air was fresh and crisp, carrying the scent of wild grass and pine. The cowboy took a deep breath, thinking about the journey ahead. The plains were wide and open, yes, but they were not without danger. He knew they would face challenges, both from the land and from people who might be following. He had to remain alert, not just for himself but for Ahioka, who now depended on him entirely. Once the horses were watered, he returned to the cabin and gently shook Ahioka awake. "Time to get moving," he said softly. "We have a long day ahead." Ahioka rubbed her eyes and slowly got up, still careful with her movements. She had learned to move cautiously, conserving her strength and avoiding injury. The cowboy handed her some bread and dried meat, which she accepted silently. They ate together, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustling of leaves in the wind. After breakfast, they packed their few belongings and mounted their horses. The cowboy took the lead, guiding them along a narrow trail that wound through the rolling hills. Ahioka followed, her hands steady on the reins, her eyes alert to the surroundings. She had learned quickly that the world could change in an instant, that danger could come without warning. As they rode, the cowboy tried to teach her some basic skills: how to read the land, how to notice signs of animals or people, and how to move quietly when necessary. She listened intently, absorbing everything like a sponge. Though she was still cautious, she began to show small signs of confidence. She asked questions about the land, the horses, and the things he carried with him. Each question was a step forward, a sign that she was slowly beginning to trust him. By midday, the sun was high, and the heat pressed down on the plains. The cowboy spotted a small cluster of trees near a creek and suggested they stop for a rest. They tied their horses to sturdy branches and settled under the shade. Ahioka knelt by the water, letting the cool stream run over her hands. The cowboy watched her quietly, noting the small changes in her posture, the way she seemed more at ease than she had yesterday. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. Both of them froze, eyes scanning the area. A pair of coyotes appeared, their eyes bright in the sunlight. The cowboy quickly stood, moving between Ahioka and the animals.
"Stay calm," he said firmly. The coyotes barked once, then disappeared into the brush.
Ahioka exhaled slowly, her heart racing. She had faced wild animals before, but having someone to protect her made all the difference. "You see," the cowboy said gently, You're safe as long as we stay alert together. Ahioka nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. It was a brief moment, but it meant something. She was learning that she didn't have to face the world alone anymore. The cowboy's presence was not just protection. It was reassurance, a reminder that someone cared enough to keep her safe. After resting and eating a light meal, they continued their journey. The trail became rougher, winding through rocky hills and narrow valleys. The horses stumbled over loose stones, and the cowboy guided them carefully, making sure Ahioka could follow without injury. Despite the challenges, she seemed determined to keep going. Her eyes were focused, her body moving with purpose, and the cowboy admired her perseverance. As afternoon approached, the sky darkened with the promise of a storm. The wind picked up, and distant thunder rumbled across the plains. The cowboy realized they needed shelter quickly. He scanned the horizon and spotted a small cave in the side of a rocky hill. It wasn't much, but it would provide protection from the coming storm. "Follow me," he said. "We'll stay in that cave until the storm passes." Ahioka nodded, guiding her horse carefully over the uneven ground. The cowboy went ahead, helping her navigate the last few steps. Once inside, they set their horses up as best they could, giving them a small area to rest. The cave was narrow and damp, but it would keep them dry. The storm arrived with a sudden rush of wind and rain. The sound of raindrops hitting the rocky ceiling echoed through the cave. Outside, the plains were a blur of water and wind, but inside, they were safe. The cowboy built a small fire using dry wood he had carried, the flames flickering and providing warmth. Ahioka watched quietly, fascinated by the way he worked with such skill and calm. As the rain poured outside, they ate a small meal by the fire. Ahioka finally began to speak more freely, telling small pieces of her story. She spoke of her family, of the hardships she had endured, and of the long days spent hiding from people who wanted to hurt her. The cowboy listened patiently, never interrupting, offering comfort through his presence and quiet understanding. "You've been through a lot," he said softly, "but you're stronger than you think. You've survived everything the world threw at you, and now you're not alone anymore." Ahioka looked at him, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and gratitude. She had spent so long believing that no one would help her, that she was completely alone. But here was a man who had not only saved her, but also treated her with kindness and respect. It was a new experience, one that was difficult to fully trust, but she felt a spark of hope. The storm continued through the evening, the cave echoing with the sound of rain and wind. The cowboy kept watch, making sure their small space was safe. He could see the subtle changes in Ahioka, the way she sat closer to the fire, the way she seemed less tense, the small gestures that showed she was beginning to relax. As night fell, the storm began to lessen. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the wind calmed. Outside, the plains were dark and quiet, the only sounds coming from the occasional drip of water from the rocks. Inside, the fire cast warm, flickering light on their faces. Ahioka rested against the wall of the cave, her head slightly bowed, while the cowboy remained alert, his eyes scanning the entrance. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we'll keep moving. There's a safe place I know where you can rest properly and regain your strength." Ahioka nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She trusted him more now, not just because he had saved her, but because he had proven through his actions that he would protect her. His calmness and patience gave her a sense of stability she had not felt in a long time. As they settled down for the night, the cowboy thought about the journey ahead. He knew there would be more challenges, more dangers, and more obstacles to overcome, but he also knew that they had made it through one day together, and that gave him confidence. Together, he and Ahioka could face whatever the frontier had in store. He glanced at her one last time before closing his eyes. The young woman, once frail and desperate, now had a chance at a new life. The cowboy had made a promise to protect her, and he intended to keep it no matter the cost. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the plains washed and glistening in the light of a rising moon. Inside the cave, two lives, once strangers, had begun to intertwine, bound by trust, courage, and the quiet understanding that they would face the world together. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The next morning, the sky was clear, and the sun cast a soft glow over the plains. The cowboy woke early, as usual, and glanced over at Ahioka. She was already awake, sitting quietly near the fire, her dark hair catching the sunlight. There was a new strength in her posture, a quiet determination in her eyes that hadn't been there when he first found her. He nodded to her with a small smile. "Ready to move?" he asked. Ahioka nodded. She had slept well for the first time in many days, and though her muscles still ached, her body felt stronger. The cowboy packed their belongings, gave the horses water, and helped her mount carefully. Together they continued their journey, following the trail he knew would lead them to a safer place, a small settlement on the edge of the plains where travelers often found shelter. As they rode, the cowboy noticed something unusual. Off in the distance, a thin column of dust rose from the ground. At first, he thought it might be a herd of animals, but as he squinted, he realized the movement was too deliberate, too organized. It was a group of people on horseback, moving fast and with purpose. His heart tightened. People traveling in the West could be helpful, yes, but they could also be dangerous. He knew the history of the plains, the tensions between settlers, travelers, and those who were fleeing danger. He quickly realized these riders might be looking for Ahioka, tracking her escape, or perhaps seeking a reward for returning her. He slowed their horses, keeping to the low ground and behind a small rise of earth. "Ahioka," he said quietly, "we might have company. Stay close to me and do exactly as I say." Her eyes widened, but she trusted him without question. She leaned close to his horse, her body tense but ready. The cowboy's experience guided them. He knew the terrain well and could use it to their advantage. They moved carefully, using the natural cover of rocks and bushes. The riders were growing closer, the sound of hooves faint but steady on the dry ground. The cowboy scanned the landscape, looking for an opportunity to avoid a direct encounter. He spotted a narrow ravine to their left that could serve as a temporary hiding place. "Quickly," he whispered. "We'll take the ravine. Stay low." Ahioka followed, her hands gripping the reins tightly. They guided the horses into the ravine, keeping as quiet as possible. The steep sides of the rock offered protection, and the cowboy crouched behind a boulder, peering over to see the riders approaching. The riders came into view, a small group of 3 men. Their faces were partially covered by scarves, their eyes sharp and searching. The cowboy's heart raced. He did not intend to fight if he could avoid it, but he would defend Ahioka if necessary. He studied the riders, noting their weapons and their posture. They were experienced, but not as skilled in moving quietly as he was. The men slowed, scanning the area, but the cowboy and Ahioka remained hidden. They waited, holding their breath as the riders passed dangerously close. One of the men stopped, sniffing the air as if sensing something. The cowboy's hand rested gently on Ahioka's shoulder. "Stay still," he whispered. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The riders moved closer, then past, finally disappearing over a distant hill. The cowboy exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. "That was close," he said softly. "But we're safe for now." Ahioka let out a breath she had been holding, her body trembling slightly. Ah, 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 ah. She looked at him with wide eyes, and for the first time, she spoke more than a word. They, they, they were looking for me, she whispered. I know, he replied gently, but you don't have to face them alone. I won't let anyone hurt you. The bond between them deepened in that moment. It was no longer just survival. It was trust, reliance, and understanding. Ahioka's eyes, once filled with fear, now reflected a cautious hope. She had found someone who would protect her, someone whose presence made the world feel less threatening. After the riders had disappeared, they continued cautiously, keeping to low ground and hidden trails. The cowboy guided them through the rolling hills, using every bit of his knowledge to stay out of sight. Ahioka's confidence grew with each step, her movements becoming more assured. She asked questions about the riders, about the land, and about the strategies he used to stay safe. The cowboy answered patiently, teaching her how to observe, how to anticipate danger, and how to move quietly. By late afternoon, they reached a small grove near a creek. It was an ideal spot to rest and regain their strength. The cowboy tied the horses to trees, and they knelt by the water to drink. The sound of the flowing stream was calming, a brief moment of peace after the tension of the morning. As they rested, Ahioka spoke more freely, told him about her capture, about the days she had spent hungry and alone, and about the fear she had felt knowing that people were hunting her. The cowboy listened quietly, offering comfort through his presence and small gestures, a gentle touch on the shoulder, a reassuring nod, a soft word of encouragement.
You've been through so much, he said gently.
But you're stronger than you realize, and you're not alone anymore. Ahioka looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She had spent so long believing that no one would help her, that she would have to face the world entirely on her own. But here was a man who had not only saved her, but also treated her with respect and care. It was a new experience, one that was difficult to trust fully, but she felt a growing sense of hope. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plains, they prepared for the night. The cowboy found a small, hidden depression in the land where their horses could rest safely. He built a small fire for warmth and cooked a simple meal. Ahioka helped quietly, her movements becoming more confident and coordinated. Together they shared the meal in companionable silence, the tension of the day slowly easing. After dinner, the cowboy spoke softly. Tomorrow, we'll move toward the settlement, I know. It's a safe place where you can rest properly and regain your strength.
We just need to make it there without being seen.
Ahioka nodded. She trusted him completely now, her fear replaced by a cautious confidence. She had learned that his promises were real, that he would protect her no matter what. As night fell, the cowboy kept watch while Ahioka slept. The plains were quiet, save for the occasional rustle of a nocturnal animal or the distant call of an owl. The cowboy's mind was alert, constantly scanning for any signs of danger. He knew the world could be unpredictable, but he was ready to face whatever came, knowing he had someone to protect and someone who trusted him completely. The stars shone brightly overhead, casting a gentle light on the sleeping land. Inside their small camp, two lives, once strangers, now bound by trust and shared experience, rested. The cowboy had made a promise to protect Ahioka, and he intended to keep it, no matter the cost. And for Ahioka, the world felt a little less frightening, a little more hopeful, because she knew that someone had her back, someone who would not let her face danger alone. In the quiet of that night, under the vast sky of the western plains, the journey of survival, trust, and courage continued. They did not yet know the full challenges that awaited them, the obstacles that would test their resolve, or the dangers that would force them to rely on one another. But they were ready. Together they were stronger, braver, and more determined to face whatever the world could throw at them. And in that moment, the cowboy and the young Apache woman understood something important. Survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to stand by each other when the world seemed against them. They had found that in one another, and it was a bond that would carry them through the days to come. The morning air was crisp and calm, a welcome change from the tense day before. The cowboy stirred first, stretching his stiff muscles and glancing at Ahioka. She had slept more soundly than he had ever seen her, and there was a quiet confidence in her posture now. The hardships of the past days had begun to leave their mark, not as pain, but as resilience. She was learning to trust the world again, starting with him. "Time to get moving," he said softly, helping her rise. "The settlement isn't far now. We just need to keep steady and stay alert." Ahioka nodded, her eyes bright with determination. The journey had been long and difficult, but she felt stronger with each passing mile. She had learned to ride steadily, to observe the land carefully, and to trust the cowboy's guidance. She had begun to understand that danger could be avoided with patience and planning, and that she no longer needed to face it alone. They mounted their horses and set off, the trail leading them across rolling plains and past clusters of trees. The cowboy guided them carefully, keeping to low ground and using natural cover wherever possible. He glanced at Ahioka from time to time, noting the growing confidence in her movements. She was no longer the fragile, fearful girl he had found days ago. She was learning to carry herself with quiet strength. As the day progressed, the sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the plains a brilliant gold. The cowboy spotted familiar landmarks in the distance, the small settlement he had told Ahioka about. It was a modest cluster of cabins and a few fields, surrounded by a low wooden fence. Travelers often stopped there, and he knew it was a safe place for anyone seeking shelter from the dangers of the frontier. "Look there," he said, pointing toward the settlement. "That's where we'll rest. You'll be safe there, and you can finally get the proper food and rest you need." Ahioka's eyes lit up with relief. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. She had survived so much, and now there was a place where she could finally feel secure. Her hands tightened slightly on the reins, not with fear, but with anticipation. As they drew closer, the cowboy remained vigilant. Even near the settlement, the frontier could be unpredictable. He guided their horses slowly, scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. The settlement was quiet, with only a few figures moving about. He could see a woman tending to a small garden and a man repairing a fence. It seemed peaceful, almost welcoming, a stark contrast to the harsh plains they had crossed. Once they reached the edge of the settlement, the cowboy dismounted and helped Ahioka down from her horse. She looked around in wonder at the small buildings, the neatly tended gardens, and the people moving calmly about their daily tasks. It was a world away from the struggles she had faced, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel relief. The cowboy led her to the main cabin where a kind-faced woman greeted them. "Welcome," she said warmly. "You look like you've come a long way. We have food, water, and a place to rest." Ahioka's lips trembled slightly as she nodded, feeling both shy and grateful. She had spent so long avoiding people that kindness felt almost foreign, but the warmth in the woman's voice and the peaceful surroundings reassured her. The cowboy gave her a gentle nod. You'll be safe here, he said. Stay close to them, eat well, and rest. You've earned it. Ahioka looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. She wanted to speak, to thank him properly, but words felt too small for everything he had done. Instead, she gave a quiet nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. The woman showed Ahioka to a small room with a soft bed and a window that looked out over the plains. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she could lie down and relax completely. The cowboy stayed with her for a few moments, ensuring she was comfortable and safe. You've come a long way, he said softly. Rest now, you'll need your strength for the days ahead. Ahioka settled onto the bed, her body finally allowing itself to relax. She could feel the tension of the past days slipping away, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. She looked at the cowboy who stood by the doorway, and for the first time, she smiled. It was small, tentative, but it carried the weight of hope and gratitude. The cowboy returned her smile with a gentle nod. I'll be nearby, he said. If you need anything, you'll find me. After ensuring she was comfortable, he stepped outside, taking a moment to survey the plains. The journey had been long and challenging, but he had kept his promise. He had protected Ahioka, guided her, and ensured she reached safety. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his actions had made a difference, that someone's life had been changed for the better. As the day passed, Ahioka rested and ate, regaining her strength. She began to interact with the people in the settlement, cautious at first but gradually more confident. She shared small stories of her journey and learned about the lives of those around her. Each conversation was a step toward healing, a way to rebuild trust in the world and in people. The cowboy remained nearby, watching over her, offering guidance when needed but giving her space to grow. He understood that protection was not just about keeping danger away. It was also about letting someone find their own strength and confidence. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Ahioka walked outside with the cowboy. The plains stretched before them wide and open, but now they looked different. The harshness of the land was still there, but it no longer seemed threatening. With safety, guidance, and companionship, it had become something she could navigate, something she could survive in and even appreciate. You've been very brave, the cowboy said softly, his voice carrying a quiet pride. You've faced so much and never gave up. That courage will carry you far. Ahioka looked up at him, a mix of emotions in her eyes, relief, gratitude, and a growing sense of hope. I wouldn't have made it without you, she admitted softly. The cowboy shook his head gently. No, he said. You made it because of your strength. I only helped guide you. You did all the hard work. Never forget that. For a long moment they stood in silence, the wind brushing gently across the plains. The stars began to appear, tiny points of light in the deepening sky, and the world felt calm and safe. The cowboy knew the journey was not over. Life on the frontier could be unpredictable, and there would always be challenges ahead. But he also knew that Ahioka now had something she hadn't had before: strength, hope, and the knowledge that she was not alone. She had someone who would protect her, guide her, and stand by her side when the world became dangerous. Ahioka felt a quiet sense of gratitude and determination. She had survived so much already, and now she could look forward to a future where she could live with hope and confidence. She had learned that even in the harshest conditions, kindness and trust could exist, and that courage could grow even from the smallest beginnings. The cowboy and Ahioka returned to the settlement, walking side by side. The people welcomed them warmly, and for the first time in a long while, Ayoka felt like she belonged somewhere. The settlement was not just a place of safety, it was a place where she could heal, learn, and grow. As night fell completely, the cowboy stayed outside for a while, watching over the settlement. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his promise had been fulfilled. He had protected Ahioka, guided her through danger, and helped her reach a place where she could begin a new life. Finally, he turned back toward the cabin where Ahioka rested. The stars shone brightly above, and the plains stretched endlessly beyond. He knew that the bond they had formed would endure, a connection built on trust, courage, and shared experience. And for Ahioka, the world was no longer a place of fear and isolation. It was a place of hope, safety, and new beginnings. The journey had been difficult, but together they had overcome every obstacle. And as the night wrapped the plains in quiet darkness, one thing was certain. Ahioka was safe, protected, and ready to face the future with strength and courage, knowing that the cowboy who had saved her would always be there to watch over her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for a life filled with safety, trust, and the possibility of new beginnings. And in that hope, both she and the cowboy found a quiet peace that made every hardship worth enduring.